feel like I gotta censor this because it either offends people to no end or they love it so much it turns them on. It's the Nintendo Switch 2, everybody! Nobody's happy with this thing. Either people are acting like it killed their firstborn or they're willing to defend it to no end and they're so sick of all the discourse surrounding this. Fellas, we're talking about video games here. It's not that deep. The first few months of the Nintendo Switch 2's existence have been a bit tumultuous all over the place. Either it's the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. The answer's always in between. I mean, there's some dumb crap with this thing, and I just kind of want to talk about what my thoughts have been on the Nintendo Switch 2 for the first few months of it being on the market. And I've talked about, you know, a lot of the stuff surrounding the Nintendo Switch 2 and, you know, its reveal, its launch, and all of that. Remember, I talked about, you know, the initial reveal, then the Nintendo Direct. Talked about everything I did surrounding the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2 and what I thought about Mario Kart World so far, too. But I haven't dived too deep into my thoughts on the Nintendo Switch 2 itself. So keep in mind, this is just my initial thoughts on the first couple months of the Switch 2 being a thing. And yeah, overall, I would say I like it, but man, there's been a ton of dumb garbage surrounding this thing that's just kind of made a lot of stuff not as exciting as I think it should be. But, you know, that's also kind of just a matter of the fact of, like, where we are with Nintendo and the gaming industry and all that stuff. But, you know, we'll get into that. But first, here's a message from somebody who paid us.
Hi, my name is Scott, and I have such a thing for fresh, never frozen meals delivered directly to my doorstep under the name Factor, but I just haven't found anything that can scratch that itch. Oh, thank God! This video is sponsored by Factor. Hey, have you ever been hungry, but you just haven't had time to factor in cooking and cleaning, or hey, maybe just want a little juice? Well, Factor supplies dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep, and now with their new expanded menu, eating well has never tasted so, well, double the seafood and protein options. More Mediterranean meals than ever before. And you can now swap out select protein options at no additional cost. Do you love chicken but hate pork chops? Swap it for free. They don't care. Just simply heat your meal following their easy instructions, and you have restaurant quality food at your fingertips within minutes. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code STASHFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code STASHFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% plus free breakfast for 1 year.
Are you still with us? Okay. Firstly, the system itself. I think it feels fine. One thing I really like about it is the more rounded kind of feel to it all, you know, just holding it like this. I love the fact that the system itself is much more curved than before. But while the feel of the system is definitely, like, improved, I don't really think it's, like, substantially improved. I feel like a lot of it is mostly improved just based on the fact that it's just in general, like, bigger. Like, yeah, it feels more comfortable to hold, but also at the same time, it's more clumsy to hold because, like, if I'm moving this around the house and everything, you know, it's kind of harder to just, like, you know, one palm it. That is why I use the kickstand as a little handle, almost like how the GameCube had a handle. And you know what? This works way better than it has any right to. The design of the system, it's fine. I don't really care. It looks nice and everything, you know, like it just feels like a revised Nintendo Switch. And that's how a lot of stuff with the Switch 2 feels, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's easy to go online and make videos just like this one, where, you know, it's like, man, the Nintendo Switch 2 just doesn't have a feel. You know, look back at the old Nintendo consoles and stuff, and, you know, yeah, I think it's kind of unfortunate that, you know, like, oh, the eShop doesn't have music, and the UI looks basically identical to the Nintendo Switch 1. You know, that is unfortunate, but at the same time, doesn't really matter. So it's like, I get it, but it's also like, you know, like there's not as much whimsy in the video game console itself. It's all about just like getting you directly to the games, which that's not to say the Nintendo Switch 2 doesn't have like any character. Like there's all kinds of little small things with it. I mean, even just on the initial boot up sequence, just having that little like music cue play and like all these little sound effects as the entire like menu setup pops up. You know, I thought that was really cute, but again, you know, that's on the initial setup. It's one of the many elements of the Switch 2 that just kind of make this feel less like a brand new console launch and more of just like the next iteration of what we already had, which, I mean, it's called Nintendo Switch 2, so yeah. And again, that's the thing, like, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it kind of made the past couple of months feel like, you know, like, hey, you know, where's all the new stuff or something. You know, I've seen a lot of discourse surrounding how, oh, the Switch 2's launch wasn't that great, or, oh man, I'm getting bored with my Switch 2. And, you know, I'm not playing my Switch 2 all the time or anything, but I think the idea that, like, oh, there's absolutely nothing to play, I get it, but it's also a little kind of like, come on, buddy. I remember seeing, like, it might have been like an IGN editor. They had like an opinion that they were like, you know, like, if it wasn't for Mario Kart, I think the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2 is one of the worst Nintendo's ever had. And I, you know, respectfully, I disagree. I'm like, what are we forgetting all previous Nintendo consoles? Okay, let's go through recent memory here. The DS had a demo for Metroid Prime Hunters, a remake of Mario 64, which some people love, some people hate, and like what? The fucking Herbs Sims in the City? The Wii's launch was pretty good, you know, you had a decent amount of titles, though, you know, a lot of the third-party games were kind of just like licensed kids crap. But of course, from Nintendo, you had Twilight Princess, Wii Sports, Excite Truck, you know, that was pretty cool. Then you have the 3DS with like nothing, Nintendog, Steel Diver, and Pilot Wings. Then all the third-party games, like Street Fighter 4 was cool, I guess, but it's also like, compare that to the Nintendo Switch 2, where you just got straight up Street Fighter 6. You know, on the Nintendo Switch 1, yes, we got Breath of the Wild, which was phenomenal, a great launch title, one of the best games of all time. But that was it! There was stuff to play during the Switch 1's launch, for sure. I mean, like, I remember trying out Snipper Clips, Fast RMX, Shovel Knight came out on the eShop around that time, and like one of the DLC campaigns, Spectre of Torment, launched early, exclusively on Switch. You know, that was cool. But like, fundamentally, that and like Super Bomberman R, which wasn't even a great game or anything, like 1-2 Switch, Just Dance 2017, like there really wasn't any reason to buy the Switch 1 at launch unless you wanted to play Breath of the Wild. And even then, if you had a Wii U, you could already play Breath of the Wild on the Wii U. So, you know, I almost feel like I've seen a bit of, you know, romanticizing the Switch 1's first year, which was a great first year. But keep in mind, the Switch 2 launched a couple months after the Switch 1 came out in March of 2017. You know, this came out in June, so you know, it only has like 6 months within the year, and I feel like they've been packing in those 6 months fairly well. You know, I think just the fact that the Switch 2 launched with the brand new Mario Kart and everything's fully new in this game, and you know, it's really huge and fully featured, you know, sort of, you know, we'll get into that. You know, I think that's massive. I think the problem with Mario Kart World is, even though, like, you know, we all enjoy Mario Kart, and Mario Kart's a game that we're like, oh yeah, we're gonna play this for thousands of hours. It's definitely not a game that I play for like hours and hours and hours straight. It's definitely more of kind of like, you know, I'll play an hour here, and then maybe I'll go away and come back to it later and everything. So I think like the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2 almost felt like, you know, it's just like, oh yeah, this game is really cool. I love Mario Kart World and everything, but it's also like, you know, like, all right, I'm good for now. Whereas in comparison with the Nintendo Switch 1, like, I remember just getting sucked into Breath of the Wild. You know, that's like a single player open world adventure game where it's, you're gonna get sucked in for hours on end. Mario Kart isn't as much of that type of game, even though Mario Kart World could have been that type of game if they designed it a little differently, but I digress. But I think the third-party lineup was pretty decent on Switch 2 at launch. Like, there was a decent array of third-party games to play on Switch 2 at launch. I think one of the problems was, though, like, not a ton really hit afterwards. It was almost like, hey, all these games came out on launch day, and that's it for a while. Like, I hope that suffices. Now, I've seen reports come out that Nintendo is incredibly selective with who gets a Switch 2 dev unit right now. So I think that definitely kind of explains a lot of like why we don't see like this huge amount of like actual like Switch 2 dedicated software releasing. So I get it. And you know, kind of trying to be like, oh, there's nothing to play on Switch 2. Like, that's not true. But at the same time, I don't think a lot of the games available for Switch 2, like third-party multi-platform wise, they just aren't that exciting. And I just kind of feel that way about a lot of third-party stuff in general on Switch 2. That doesn't mean I'm not happy and excited in general to have these games on Switch 2. But I do feel like that kind of like aha moment of the Switch 1 where, you know, you're playing these big home console games in the palm of your hands. That doesn't hit nearly as hard with Switch 2. It's cool. It's definitely cool to get something like Cyberpunk on Switch 2 and just have like a very stable, fully featured version of the game on a dedicated handheld. But I just feel like after nearly a decade of the Switch 1, and then over the years, you know, having a lot of these PC handhelds hit the scene, like the Steam Deck and ROG Ally and all of that, that doesn't take away from what the Switch 2 is doing, but it does make it a little, like, okay, you know, like, this isn't mind-blowing, like, okay, yeah, cool. And it's still, like, a feat to see a lot of these games, you know, on a dedicated handheld like this, but I just find that a lot of the excitement surrounding, like, seeing these games hit the Switch 2, like, it's there, but it also doesn't feel nearly as, like, incredible as the Switch 1. But, you know, like, that's always gonna happen, you know? Like, it's just, like, you're not really gonna get those giant, exciting moments, you know? Seeing Persona 3 Reload head over to the Switch 2, I'm like, cool! But it's not, like, crazy. So I think, like, third-party output has been, like, decent enough so far, but the reports I've been seeing that, like, third-party games are kind of struggling to sell on Switch 2. I mean, we can infer a ton from that, you know, like there's all kinds of reasons for why that might be happening. For one, nobody's buying a Switch 2 to play Street Fighter 6 or, you know, the Hitman trilogy or Yakuza 0 or any of that, you know. Those are supplemental titles for what you're getting a Switch 2 for, which is probably going to be for Mario Kart or Donkey Kong or a lot of the Nintendo stuff. Or, you know, you just want to upgrade your Switch 1 or whatever, you know. Like, a lot of these third-party games are going to be stuff you're more willing to buy when it makes sense for you to, which doubly makes sense because everything is piss expensive now. So it's like, what, you already pay like $450 or $500 for a Switch 2, maybe some extra accessories. I mean, like, what, a Pro Controller is over $80, like around $90 or something. And then pretty much all these third-party games are downloads only, and they're on those dumbass game key cards. So, yeah, you're only going to be able to fit so many games onto your Switch 2, and you know, if you want to fit more of them on there, then you need a brand new micro SD express card, and those are stupid hard to come across. And even if you do come across them, they're only like 256 gigabytes right now, and the 1 terabyte Lexar card that's the one to get is like not available anywhere, and I had to buy mine on eBay for like $300 because I'm an idiot. So by the time you finally get all of that, do you really want to spend $60 more on a third-party game that might be $30 on PS4 or PS5 right now, and it's been on the market for years on end? You know, like, I played Yakuza 0 on Switch 2, and, you know, Yakuza 0 is a cool game and everything, but, you know, it's $60. And I know for a fact on PS4 I could get Yakuza 0 for, like, less than 20. And we'll talk about the game key cards again later down the line, you know, and right now we're just talking about the lineup in general. But yeah, I personally find that a third-party game getting announced for Switch 2 is really cool. I'm like, oh, great. And then you see it's a game key card, and that almost shaves off a percentage of my excitement. It almost feels like it's just like, okay, so this is just kind of like a lesser release. I don't know. Like, it just almost feels like the release doesn't matter as much. And, like, I know that's kind of dumb, but, you know, like, I can't help that my brain kind of goes to that where I'm like, oh. Because fundamentally, in some cases, I'm just kind of thinking, like, well, what's the difference between this and just buying this on, like, Steam Deck or something? Other than the Switch 2 release is, like, a dedicated Switch 2 version of the game. The Steam Deck version is just, like, you're playing the Steam version, and fingers crossed it's optimized or runs well on the Steam Deck, but still, you know, like, I just feel like it kind of makes a lot of these third-party releases feel lesser than they should. And I think that's really unfortunate, but overall, I do think, like, there's more than enough stuff to play, but at the same time, a lot of the stuff that you can play on Switch 2, a lot of it isn't the most, like, exciting things in the world, and that's even on the Nintendo side of things as well. Now, keep in mind, I do think kind of like ragging on the Switch 2's lineup is a little ridiculous when we get Mario Kart World at launch and then Donkey Kong Bonanza like literally a month later. But man, Mario Kart World has just been through the ringer this summer, hasn't it? You know, it starts off, you know, at launch, like, it's like, oh my god, this is so cool, this is so much fun. And then you just start to see the cracks. Now listen, I really enjoy Mario Kart World. I think this is such an immensely talented piece of racing game art. But there's so many little flaws or weird things that just kind of like all add up to a point where the game just gets kind of frustrating to jump into, where it's just like all these little problems, like you're just kind of like, why was this a problem to begin with? Why hasn't this been fixed yet? All of this stuff just kind of like adds up to make for a great game that has so many little frustrating elements that just kind of make it harder to enjoy it for what it is. You know, I think the thing that just really made things like just stupid was that whole update Nintendo pushed, where if you're playing online races, the original thing was if you would hit the random option for the tracks, you would always get a traditional 3-lap track, which is annoying. You had to do that in general because the game, for some reason, puts all these damn routes in the mix. They're always like, hey, you know, if you just want to play a standard race, here's a fucking route. And the thing is, like, the routes definitely make Mario Kart World what it is. Like, the whole idea that, like, hey, you know, you have your traditional racetracks in the game, but then you go from racetrack to racetrack, and, you know, you can consider that to be a track. But, yeah, the routes aren't as good as a traditional racetrack, and I think Nintendo knows that, because why else do you have traditional racetracks in the game? Because you know that those are specifically designed to be great racetracks. And then the tracks between the tracks, you know for a fact, are way more boring and not as interesting. Now, it's not like you're not going to have any fun on the routes or anything, but, like, you know, the racetracks are fun because I want to learn the layouts. I want to master these tracks and everything. I'm not going to master a damn route. And for the most part, these things are just straightaways. Now, to an extent, I kind of wish that Nintendo would have designed the routes to be more fun. But as they are in the game, like, you know, in the context of the Knockout Tour mode and all of that, they're perfectly fine. Like, I think the routes work in that. But as traditional races, like, yeah, they're just such a buzzkill. And Nintendo pushed an update where hitting random does not guarantee you a 3-lap track. And, yeah. That was annoying. And then they did something where they pushed another update where, you know, it sounded like Nintendo was listening, where they were just like, oh, yeah, we made it so then 3-lap tracks will appear more frequently. And everybody was, like, cheering. Everybody was like, yeah! And then, like, I don't know, it feels the exact goddamn same. I didn't notice a huge difference in, like, the track selection they were giving. So Mario Kart World is a great game, but, like, yeah, I think a lot of, like, how it functions has made it so then I've kind of fallen off of it. And, you know, I'll jump in every now and then. But I'm definitely kind of waiting to see a couple things added, a couple of things fixed. And pretty much most of my issues with Mario Kart World are very fixable. You know, I would love to see what, you know, they can potentially add to the game over time. But I think even then, like, what Mario Kart World is in general, it just makes it, like, a bit of a different flavor than something like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I honestly do feel like when it comes to, like, local multiplayer, if, you know, I have friends over and we're all like, oh, yeah, you know, like, let's just casually play some Mario Kart or something, I'd still probably pop in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I feel like that's probably better for just quick jump in, play some local split screen and whatnot, you know. I think that's just an easier, better option for that. But, you know, it doesn't mean Mario Kart World is bad. It just means, like, it is a different thing. I think it's definitely more of an experience in the sense of, like, oh, this big Mario Kart open world experience kind of thing, rather than a direct replacement for 8 Deluxe in some ways. But I think it could potentially become, like, a just easy direct replacement for 8 Deluxe, you know, with some updates and added content and all of that. But as it stands, like, I really enjoyed Mario Kart World, but I definitely need them to fix a couple of things, and I need a bit more going on with it to kind of jump back in and put even more time into it. But hey, thankfully at launch, if Mario Kart World didn't do it for you, here's another game that won't do it for you. Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. This has been a fun little punching bag. I don't think it's, like, bad or anything. Switch 2 Welcome Tour is just a painfully lame piece of software, but, you know, for somebody that likes kind of like Nintendo trivia and crap like that, just seeing kind of like interesting little tech demos and stuff, like, you know, I get some enjoyment out of it. You know, the fact that it's $10, like, it could be a lot better. It could also be a lot worse. You know, 1-2 Switch launched with the Switch 1, and, you know, a lot of people similarly was like, there should be a pack-in, and that was $50. And I do think Switch 2 Welcome Tour is better than 1-2 Switch, but at the same time, it's just not as interesting. You know, I think my problem with Switch 2 Welcome Tour is it's just such a fucking lame thing where it's just like you're going around and the whole thing is like, okay, go up to every element of this controller and get your stamp that you went up to them, and now here's a bunch of quizzes as to pieces of trivia about your Switch 2. And some of them are cute, some of them are kind of interesting, and then a lot of them are kind of like, it's like, whatever, like, where are the speakers located on the Switch 2? Some of the tech demos are interesting and cool and stuff, but also the tech demos are just so unapologetically tech demos. I think that's just the thing. Like, this does kind of feel like, instead of actually crafting like a unique game and a package of these little mini games or whatever, they literally just took like the bare basic tech demos that they created for this console and just packaged them in this Switch 2 Welcome Tour game. You know, for example, like one of the first tech demos you have in this game is the UFO thing where you're using the Joy-Con as a mouse and just avoiding like the spiky balls and everything, and just like there's really no background at all. You know, like it's just like, it almost feels like they wanted to make this feel like a little like console technology expo center thing, so then they could use that as an excuse to really like just present these tech demos as is. You don't have to add any flair or anything like that. Like, it is what it is. Now, to be fair, I am kind of like, for $10, there is stuff here. But at the same time, you know, I think going like, well, for $10, you do get content. Yeah, but it's also like, you gotta want to like move around this controller and just read a bunch of text that you probably don't even care about. Keep in mind, I love Nintendo trivia. I love hearing about their development stuff. So to me, some of this stuff was genuinely really interesting, and I'm kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. But at the same time, this is the kind of stuff that's like, this is cool reading it on like an article on social media, being forced to do this all to complete a checklist, to then move on to another suite of crap you gotta read and complete a checklist on, and then play tech demos that aren't dressed up at all. I mean, it's just kind of a lame package, but you know, like, it's not bad, but it's just kind of lame. Definitely has some cool stuff in it for sure, and I do feel like, you know, like it almost feels like as a pack-in, yes, it would have made sense, but I honestly feel like a lot of the people that complained that Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour should have been a pack-in, and it's egregious that they were charging money for it, I will make the argument back that a lot of the people that complained about that weren't interested in Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour to begin with. Like, they were like, that should have been a pack-in, and I'm kind of like, even if it was a pack-in, were you gonna play it? So to an extent, I kind of understand why they just made it available like as a separate purchase, because there, you know, it doesn't feel like this is not for everybody. Like, I honestly feel like a lot of people would just be bored out of their mind with this thing, and they would be like, I don't want this. I don't want to play it. So I will probably say, like, I do think charging for it is dumb. Because it's literally just, it's meant to show you around the console. It's an interactive instruction manual with a couple of cute, cool things in there. So I understand it not being like a pack-in, but as like a download, I think it should have been just like a free download, like on the eShop, and I think people would have eaten that up. I think in like 10 years, you would have seen kids all go like, oh my god, remember when Nintendo included Switch 2 Welcome Tour as a free download? Like, yeah, it was simple, but it had so many fun little tech demos and mini games and all of that. Like, you know, people would get like nostalgic over it and all that crap. Now, technically, Nintendo also had a couple of other little things on launch day. Specifically, we got Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Nintendo Switch 2 editions, which, you know, kind of kicked off this whole Nintendo Switch 2 edition thing that they've been doing. And, you know, like, I'm not going to claim that Nintendo is trying to act like these are kind of like on the same level as like a traditional, like from the ground up made for Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive game. But it does feel kind of weird that Nintendo is kind of trying to like fill some software gaps with these releases, it feels. And the effectiveness definitely varies greatly with this stuff. So I think Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 editions are great. Now, I do think, like these being paid upgrades, it is a bit confusing sometimes when you see all of the free upgrades Nintendo did for select Nintendo Switch 1 games at launch, where you had stuff like Mario Odyssey, where like, that kind of got a resolution bump, and, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet got, like has a stable frame rate now and stuff. So I feel like the main thing is a lot of these Switch 2 free updates are kind of just like, they aren't changing the fact these are Switch 1 games. Like when you boot these Switch 1 games up with Switch 2 upgrades intact, it still says on like the little loading screen like Nintendo Switch. But then these Nintendo Switch 2 edition games that you pay for, when you boot them up, it shows this is a Switch 2 game. And it definitely feels like with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you get, hey, 60 frames per second, which is crazy with these. Like, they run like butter now. Enhanced resolution, like an upscaled 4K, and maybe like an extra little bonus thing here and there. Like, you have like Zelda notes, which I don't really care. Why is it like it's something that you got to use the damn Switch app with? Like, I'm just like, why can't you just include something like this in the actual game? Now, I think the Zelda Notes feature having like a map on the phone screen, it almost brings you back to the original concept for Breath of the Wild, when it was a Wii U exclusive. So like, that's cool, I guess, but overall, I mean, like, if you've already played through Breath of the Wild, I think it's kind of cool to experience it again, at least for a bit on Switch 2. But if you've already beaten the game even like multiple times, I think it's definitely cool to boot up and play it and just feel how much smoother everything feels. But it's still Breath of the Wild. And I don't think the $10 upgrade is anything like that horrible or anything. I mean, that seems to be the standard on the other consoles. Like, I could get God of War Ragnarok on PS4 for $60, and I can put that in my PS5, and then I could pay $10 to get all the little PS5 upgrades with it. So it's pretty, that's kind of the standard. And I think Nintendo has seemed to kind of, mitigate that a little bit by including the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom upgrades with Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. That's the thing. Like, I think Nintendo always has been aware of the fact that a lot of their pricing of this junk is not very appealing. So it always seems like they try to include like a little something extra there, where it's like, well, here's another option. It's something like Mario Kart World is $80. That's stupid. But you can get it for $50 as a part of the Switch 2 bundle. Hey, it's kind of stupid. The Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's upgrades cost money, huh? Well, they're included with NSO, so like stuff like that. Okay. It sure. But I'd say the following Switch 2 editions that released over the summer of 2025, kind of dumb, man. I mean, like, Mario Party Jamboree, Nintendo Switch 2 edition plus Jamboree TV is, stupid as hell. That is egregious. I hate that. Which is a shame, man, because Jamboree is genuinely one of the best Mario parties. At least one of the best Mario parties of the past decade or so. And even when this thing was announced during the Switch 2 April Direct, I was kind of like, oh, really? Like, it's just a bunch of, like, extra modes that I'm probably gonna play like once and be like, oh, that's cute, and then that's it. But no, it's even worse than that, because Jamboree like shouldn't be labeled as a Nintendo Switch 2 edition, because you boot up this version of the game and it gives you like this menu select where you can go between, oh, Super Mario Party Jamboree, the Nintendo Switch 1 game, and then Jamboree TV, which is Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive. And Jamboree TV is like in like 4K or like at least an upped resolution and all that. But then the standard Super Mario Party Jamboree game is just, it's the same thing as it was on Nintendo Switch. Hell, Nintendo pushed an update out for this thing that said like, hey, the standard Super Mario Party Jamboree game has been updated to be at 1080p, which I was confused about, because it's like, wasn't it always at 1080p? No, it's talking about like handheld mode and stuff. Because originally when you'd play Jamboree in handheld mode on Switch 2, it'd still be at 720p since the Switch 1 screen was 720p. And it just doesn't look good. So they at least changed that, which is something, I guess. But it's still kind of like, why isn't the game in general like in a higher resolution? Like, that's ridiculous. And Jamboree TV, it's just full of a bunch of crap that like who cares about. There's some decent ideas in there, you know, like they have a couple of new rule sets, which I think is cool, but just the fact that that part of the game is separate from the standard Super Mario Party Jamboree experience is absurd. It's so stupid. It feels like just such a clunky mess, and it just reeks of like Nintendo went to the Super Mario Party developers and they just said like, hey, can you just develop a couple of like new mini games and modes that we can show off using the Nintendo Switch 2 camera with, or the mouse mode with? Because that's all this feels like. Just feels like a giant excuse to just show a couple of the new gimmicks with Switch 2 and then sell it as just like a Switch 2 edition and all of that. For $20, that is stupid. You know, like this is like a $20 DLC that you gotta buy, and you know, the game itself in general, you know, like on store shelves is $80. And that is awful. Kirby and the Forgotten Land Switch 2 edition is definitely much better. I think I'm really happy that game has a Switch 2 edition because you know, now it runs at a buttery 60 frames per second. It's at a higher resolution, and that game is phenomenal, and that's great that now it runs much better. It didn't run like poorly on Switch 1, but it did have the kind of like that funky little 30 frames per second frame rate, and then also all the enemies in the background and stuff ran at like a super low frame rate, which I thought was kind of charming, but I also, you know, am also like, yeah, well, that's obviously kind of like something that you want to fix. So it's cool that they did that. And Star-Crossed World is included with that, and it's just kind of like, okay, you know, like it's fine, it's new content, but it's also kind of like, you know, it is kind of just like a post-game hard mode kind of piece of content. So, you know, that being an extra $20 as well, I'm kind of like, you know, so that just kind of seems like what Nintendo wants to do with these Nintendo Switch 2 edition games, where it's like $10 if it's kind of just like performance is better, $20 if performance is better / new content is included. I don't think Mario Party Jamboree should have been $20. I think that should have been $10 more, if that. Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I understand, because that does include the frame rate bumps and also, you know, some extra content. But yeah, I just think like as little like gap fillers, okay, but like these Switch 2 editions, like I'm just not like that excited about. You know, a lot of these games are just, they are fundamentally the same game, they just run better. And strangely enough, with the Switch 1 backwards compatibility on the Switch 2, a lot of games just inherently run better. If you pop in like Hyrule Warriors and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity on Switch 2, like they run much more stably. Of course, like, you know, something like Kirby and the Forgotten Land goes from 30 to 60, which, you know, that's a big jump, and that does involve a bit more work than just what they did with the Switch 1 backwards compatibility, which is just kind of like, you know, it uses emulation, and, you know, it just kind of like keeps it at a stable frame rate. But I don't know. I mean, I just saw like a social media post by Nintendo advertising Forgotten Lands Switch 2 edition, and they label it as like, the pink puffball is back. I'm just like, where the hell did he go? Almost acting like this is like a brand new game. I'm just kind of like, guys, I don't know. I almost do feel like Nintendo initially was thinking a lot of these Switch 2 editions would kind of help fill the gaps, and I just feel like it's like, I'm not in the mood to play through Forgotten Land again. I love that game. It's fantastic, but it's also like, I've already beaten it. So it's just kind of like, you know, when I'm in the mood again, I'm happy that I have the Switch 2 edition, and like, you know, it's going to run a lot better and everything. But like, this is not something I'm going to jump right into right away, you know? So yeah, with the first few months of the Switch 2 kind of being like exactly how I described, like Mario Kart's great, but Mario Kart, you know, I kind of fell off of that. And, you know, there's just a bunch of like little problems that build up with that. Third-party games are cool, but, you know, a lot of them just aren't very exciting, and they're kind of just like, yeah, I'll get to that when I feel like it, or when I get to it and everything. And the Switch 2 editions, I just find, you know, are very, very hit or miss. And even then, like, I don't view those as like big new releases, it's kind of like, oh, that's cool that this game is, you know, better now, but it's also like, okay, you know, so like, I kind of understand why some people are kind of like, you know, I wish there were more stuff to play on my Switch too, but you know what? God damn it, we got Donkey Kong Bonanza. And yeah, I mean, honestly, just the fact that we got this game like a month after launch, you know, we can compare Switch 1's first year to Switch 2's. And I think Switch 1 had a bit of a better like timeline right off the bat. You know, the fact that we got Breath of the Wild at launch, then Mario Kart 8 came out a month later. And you know, like we knew like, okay, Splatoon is coming in the summer, ARMS is coming in the summer, and then we got Mario Odyssey at the end of the year kind of thing. You know, it felt like we were working towards these things. Where Switch 2, the first few months was just kind of like, okay, we got Mario Kart, and then Donkey Kong, and then who the hell knows? But just the fact that we got a brand new Mario Kart at launch, and then a month later we got a brand new 3D platformer Donkey Kong game that is a, you know, a successor to Mario Odyssey in many ways. Absolutely phenomenal. This game absolutely hooked me for the first couple of days. I think I beat it within like a day and a half because like I just couldn't put it down. And that is shocking for me because I generally find that when I sit down with a game, I usually can do like about 2 hours until I'm kind of like, I want to get up. And even then, 2 hours is pushing it. That's kind of like going like, I'm like, damn, I must have really liked this game. I usually go for like an hour and a half if I'm playing a game. Donkey Kong Bonanza, the first time I played it, I played for like 3 hours straight, and I was like, okay, I just gotta get up. I gotta move on with my day. But then later that night, I played for another 3 hours, and then the next day, I played for 3 hours again, and then 3 hours again, and then I think I played for like 6 hours straight. Once I got to like the end of the game, I'm just like, I just gotta finish this. What an incredible game. I loved this game to pieces. You know, it just feels like such a great use of the Switch 2's hardware, of just like, it feels like a genuine showcase for like what Nintendo's system can do. It feels like it is a genuine system showcase. Yes, this game like started development on Switch 1, so technically a lot of like this, you know, destruction could have been done on Switch 1, but it definitely would have been as bombastic looking, and it would have run even worse. I mean, like that's one of this game's biggest flaws. There are some funky ass frame rate moments. It's not like that frequent. I mean, like every you know, like the game consistently kind of like stutters, but it's not like that noticeable. I like there's a couple of moments where like the frame rate just gets cut in half. It's like a lot of the moments in like the final boss, and then there's like these moments where like there's this like circular wall of rot that like, you know, expands out, and you have to like jump over it and stuff. And the first time that appeared, like, oh my Christ. But yeah, this game is incredible. I think it's really cool to kind of compare this to Mario Odyssey, since this is from the same development team. And I do think, you know, like there are some things that Mario Odyssey does probably a little better. There are some things that Bonanza does a lot better. But overall, like, I think they're both like phenomenal games, and I'm just really, I think it's really cool that they took a plunge with like Donkey Kong for a new 3D platformer. I just think that's interesting, you know, like as much as a 3D Mario would have been cool, I think this is kind of cooler. You know, it's just a brand new experience, and it's still Mario. Like, you know, who gives a damn? Like, I don't know. This game is awesome. I love it. And then we got Dragon Drive in August. You know what's funny? I still haven't played Dragon Drive. That seems like a thing I should do. I'm definitely interested in trying it out, but like from what I've seen and from what I've heard from other people, it does seem exactly like what, like, I don't think it's really going to surprise me. I think the game itself seems like it will be kind of cute and fun for a little bit, and by a little bit I mean like 20 minutes, and then I'm like, okay, now what? And then like there's just not going to be any reason to play anymore. You know, it at least feels like, you know, when you look at the credits of that game, like it was a very small development team. This doesn't seem like Nintendo was ever expecting this to be like a new IP or anything crazy, or, you know, something that people should have legitimately cared about. And I think the concept is cool. I think it's weird that Nintendo never refers to the game as like what it is, like wheelchair basketball. They're always like, they call like the wheelchairs in the game like like your device or like your vehicle or something like that. I'm just like, this is kind of weird. But yeah, man, I mean, Drag and Drive just literally just feels like an excuse for them to show off the mouse controls of the Joy-Con, which, you know what, I will also say, I think the mouse controls are pretty slick. There are some times where I just think it's kind of cool to just, you know, just the fact that, like, I can just hold my Switch like this, I can just take it off, and I can just immediately, like, boom, it's a mouse. And it works well. Like, I think that gave me a couple of moments of kind of like, wow, like, you can do a lot with this. I don't think it's, like, mind-blowing or anything, but I just think the versatility of that and just being able to, you know, use a mouse whenever like that, and also use two mice like that, I can just see that becoming like a really cool big thing used in a couple of games. But of course, like that is potentially if games actually do something with it. And there's like an indie game for Switch 2 called like Mousework that is all about like mouse controls and stuff, and I think that's cool. The controls of Switch 2 itself, like the Switch 2 Pro Controller, I was absolutely shocked at how amazing that controller is. Like, it literally looked the exact same. They just added like a headphone jack, which I actually haven't used. But yeah, you know, like I just thought this was just gonna be the exact same damn thing. But no, it feels so much better. It's so soft. The sticks have such a soft, like silent feel to it, and it's so cool. It just feels so amazing in the hands. Like it's a huge upgrade in every way, and I already love the Switch 1 Pro controller, so this is crazy. Now, I wouldn't say this is like a must buy. If you already have a Switch 1 Pro controller, you can use it on Switch 2, and it's perfectly fine. But yeah, I do think the Switch 2 Pro controller was an incredible surprise. Now, in terms of the other accessories, that Switch 2 camera pisses me off. Why? Why is it here? Why are they pushing it so much? You look at like all these Switch 2 ads, and they almost always include that damn camera. And I'm just like, why? It's a fucking webcam. I just don't care. I also haven't used game chat or anything. I'm not an online multiplayer guy. I don't really talk to a lot of people while I'm playing my games, but I have heard the game chat does work fairly well. Cool. The Nintendo Switch Online Classic games, now called Nintendo Classics, you know, it feels like they've been kind of chipping away at that to make this like a very fully fleshed out library, you know, now with the GameCube games. And I've seen people mention how the GameCube emulation on Switch 2 is not ideal, and you know, I can kind of get the feel for that. You know, like I'm not an expert at all with this kind of stuff. You really got to point stuff out to me first, and then I go like, okay, oh yeah, and then I can start noticing weird things. But you know, overall, like my initial first impressions, I'm like, they play fine. You know, like the GameCube games on Switch Online, like they work perfectly fine for me personally. But even them like introducing Mario Paint to the SNES app and having the mouse controls there, I just think it's cool. You know, I think it's cool that like with the classic games on Switch and also on Switch 2, they've been much more keen on just incorporating the weird games and stuff, even as like early on as like when they did Kirby Tilt and Tumble and stuff on the Game Boy app. I'm just like, that's cool. Like, you know, like, am I really hankering to play Kirby Tilt and Tumble all the time? No, but like I think like preserving these weirder games with these stranger control schemes and everything in unique ways for, you know, everybody to play from there on forward, I think is really cool. You know, am I really gonna play Mario Paint much? No, but just the fact that it's there, it's on the modern system, and you know, like Nintendo started this classics lineup on Switch 1 and it's all carried over to Switch 2. I just think that's really, really, really cool. And the fact that we're getting GameCube games consistently, like once a month, it's just neat. You know, like it does feel like this ecosystem is just ever growing. And you know, that's exactly what I wanted. But of course, like I was saying, this doesn't necessarily feel like this brand new era of Nintendo or this brand new console as much as a lot of the old hype cycle kind of made it out to be. I kind of felt like, you know, at the very start, I'm just kind of like, this isn't going to be like the most exciting thing in the world. This just kind of feels like, let's keep this Switch train rolling with a brand new version of the Switch. Like that's what the Switch 2 feels like to me. And while I've had a lot to complain about over the past couple of months, I do feel that Nintendo is doing a fine job with the content output. It does feel like weirdly kind of like, oh man, there needs to be more stuff out. But it's also like you take a look at what the Switch 2 has been doing compared to other consoles, and just for the first 3 months, I mean, you get Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, a decent chunk of third-party games, and a couple of extra things here and there. I'm like, that's not too bad, man. Like I'm okay with the output. That doesn't mean I'm okay with other things, though. Again, like I was saying, the whole game keycard thing is just a wet blanket. That's just such a buzzkill. You had the Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase back in like late July, and I think everybody was just desperate for like new information. Nintendo was kind of like keeping things a little too silent in terms of like upcoming release dates and just like, oh, what's going on with this game or that game or whatever. After Donkey Kong, things were kind of like up in the air, and the partner showcase, it didn't really answer any questions, just brought up a couple of new games that were coming out, and pretty much all games they announced were coming out on a game key card, because that's kind of just a third-party thing. I think at this point I've bought pretty much any Switch 2 game that is fully on the cartridge. Even like certain things I decided to do, like I wanted to try out Civilization 7 on Nintendo Switch 2, but the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of the game just comes with a code in the box, not even a game key card, which is just like, okay. So what I did was I bought the Nintendo Switch 1 version of Civilization 7, which is all on a cartridge. And then I'm just like, okay, well, then I'm just going to buy the Switch 2 upgrade pack. I'm like, that's better than just getting a code in the box. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I like physical games, but I'm also not ride or die. Everything I buy needs to be physical. Like I'm fine with digital stuff, as an option. But, moving towards that being the only thing, I think is not fun. I mean, like, that's where we're heading. So it's just kind of like, okay. But it's also like, I don't know, man. I just see so many issues pop up, especially with the Switch 2. Like, you only have 256 gigs of storage, which is an upgrade from the Switch 1's 32 gigs or 64 on the OLED. But the fact that all of these third-party games are like 50 gigabytes a piece these days, like, it just makes us then like, okay, that storage is going to fill up fast. And one way you could have kind of gone around that is if these games were available on physical media. If you could just buy the cartridge and that's it. But most of these games are not on physical media. Like they're on game key cards, and you're going to have to download the damn thing anyways. I appreciate the fact that, like, yes, a game key card allows you to trade and sell the game at some point. I've heard a lot of people say that, like, oh, the game key cards take the worst aspect of physical games and the worst aspect of digital games and puts them together. And that's not entirely true. The fact that, it takes the good aspect of physical games, the fact that you can, give it, sell it and trade it and stuff, that's great. But yeah, I don't fuck with them. Sorry. I haven't bought one yet. Maybe someday, I'm not going to hold myself to never getting a game key card. But, it is a little stupid how, you see a lot of the companies that are obviously smaller companies, companies that, you can tell the people running them are a little more like in touch with consumers. The bigger the company is, the more people you have working for a company, the more that stuff doesn't really make sense to them. Like a Sega or a Ubisoft or a Square Enix, like, they don't give a shit if, like, oh, why does it matter? A game key card versus a truly physical game. Who the hell cares? Like, it doesn't make any difference to them. But you see stuff like Yuka Replayly, an indie game from a very small company, and it's not even a game that's like $60, $70. Like, it's like a $30 game. And they're putting out the physical version of that on Switch 2, and it's fully on the cartridge. So they're willing to take the hit on that because physical Nintendo Switch 2 games, for these publishers to buy, like, they're pretty pricey. There's only one variant to buy, and, it can house 64 gigabytes of storage on it, and that's it. So pretty much for these publishers, you either put your game on a game key card, or you shell out a lot of money to buy a 64 gigabyte game card to put your game on. The margins on that just aren't that great. So it's just like, I understand why a lot of people go for the game key card. This is truly, though, like, this is truly a situation where it's like you can blame so many different people for it that it just gets ridiculous. It gets to a point that I'm like, it's just a garbage situation to be in. Because you can blame Nintendo. You can be like, Nintendo, why aren't you offering more variants of the game cartridge sizes? But it's also like, do you really think Nintendo wants this? Because like Donkey Kong Bonanza is like 13 gigabytes. That means Nintendo put that game on a 64 gigabyte game card. Like, that's just wasting so much space and money at that point. You can blame a lot of the third-party game publishers for going in the game key card route, but I also can't blame them this early on in the system's lifespan because they probably are just thinking it's just like, well, let's just do that because that's a cheaper option, and they didn't really know that there would be a ton of blowback. And then I see a lot of people like dogging on games that are super small in size. Like I think like Pac-Man World 2 Repack is a very small game, and it's on a game key card on Switch 2, but it's fully on the cartridge on Switch 1 and everything. And like I've seen people dog on that, but I'm also kind of like, oh yeah, it's like a cheaper budget game, and they're probably just thinking it's just like, this isn't worth it to put on there. Now, of course, I know I just said Yukari Playly's doing that, but it's also like, I understand why like a business person would look at that and be like, why would we put this on a cartridge? Like, that's just costing way too much money at that point. So it's just like, I get it, but it's also like, you know, it's just a little ridiculous. Like, I don't know, man. I think the ones that I think are stupid is like stuff like Yakuza 0, Street Fighter 6. Those games not being on a game key card. I originally thought it made sense because I'm like, oh, well, they're bigger games and everything. So, you know, it makes sense they'd put them on a game key card. I'm kind of like thinking, I'm like, no. Like, those are the games that make the most sense to be on a full physical cartridge. Like, they would fit entirely on there. Like, why? Just do it. It's whatever. I think overall manufacturing of these cartridges is just kind of weird. Like, the technology used for these cartridges, apparently, like, you know, like, it's like they're just not available in a bunch of different capacities. And there were some articles saying the company that, you know, created this kind of technology, saying, like, they're like, oh, yeah, we're looking into different capacity sizes and all of that. So, who knows? You know, I think right now we just see a lot of game key cards on Switch 2. And it is very unfortunate, man. Like, again, like, I just feel like it kind of makes a lot of these games feel a bit lesser. Like, it's almost like they didn't even really fully release on Switch 2. And, you know, it's just weird. It's not my favorite thing in the world and all. But, you know, I don't think it makes the Switch 2 a bad console or anything. I think for just me, it just kind of feels like the impact isn't as great as I wanted it to be. Because currently where things stand with me and the Switch 2, I like the Switch 2. I think it's a fine piece of hardware, but a lot of the things with it, firstly, I think Nintendo in 2025 has just been awful at communication. I find that a lot of the stuff they've been doing with the Switch 2 is kind of hard to follow sometimes. It's kind of confusing, and even just like, you know, for a while, a lot of games just didn't have release dates. It was kind of hard to be like, what am I looking forward to here? Even like beforehand, you know, and in the March 2025 Nintendo Direct, when they announced virtual game cards, like that was so confusing. Even now, even using, you know, the user interface and stuff to swap out game cards and like figure that it's still kind of confusing. So it's weird because, you know, whenever I see a lot of the discourse online, like I see a lot of people that are just fucking pissed off at this thing, and they will like shit all over anybody that like bought a Switch 2 or whatever. And then there are people that are just fucking just, I don't know, they got like some kind of weird fetish for this thing. I don't know. My opinion is, why can't we all just get along? Or at the very least, let's just all chill out a little bit. I've seen a lot of people like freaking out about how like, oh man, the Switch 2, like there's not enough games coming out. Oh man, Nintendo's president should resign or just some crap like that. I don't know. Listen, guys, I think we've possibly all been in situations where we care a little too much about a video game or what a video game company's doing or whatnot. I've kind of felt like I've been at a point where I'm just like, I love following Nintendo. I don't really give a though. I don't really care what they do. If they're boring right now, they're boring right now. It is what it is. I got shit I gotta do today. If they got stuff going on, that's great. Like, I'm like, oh, great. Some fun YouTube videos to watch about my, like, a company I really like following and everything. You know, that's just my thing, you know? Like, I love hearing everybody's opinion on what's going on with this bum-ass company, which is especially funny for me to say when they've they've invited me to the Switch 2 launch. I remember some guy came up to me at Nintendo NY when Nintendo invited me there. He was just asking me like, Scott, why hasn't Nintendo made a Wii U too? I just stared him directly in the face. I'm like, I don't know, man, but those bums at Nintendo better get off of their lazy ass and get to work. They also invited me to this event. Thank you very much, Nintendo. I don't really care what I say about this company. I love Nintendo crap, man, but it's also like, who cares? You can love a company, hate a company all you want. These are video games, man. Like, this is such a fun element of life to just bitch about and talk about and experience and all of that. I love playing these games. I love talking about these games and everything, but I'm not freaking out this much over this stuff. It gets to the point when I see like a lot of the people that are really pissed off about the Switch 2, like just like going after anybody that they see who's bought like Switch 2 stuff. You can do that if you want, man, but like I just don't really see how this is productive. But the same goes for the people that are just going like, listen, guys, I understand that Nintendo has been doing a lot of bad stuff lately, but like I just can't get too mad about it because it's just like, you know what? Like I love Nintendo and I'm just staying positive and stuff. Like I'm just like, you can do that, but it's also like who cares? If you enjoy the Switch 2, enjoy the Switch 2. If you don't enjoy the Switch 2, don't enjoy the Switch 2. But like why are we going to war against each other, man? Who gives a shit? Like arguing with somebody that bought a Switch 2 why they're an idiot and why they shouldn't have bought a Switch 2. What are you going to do? Are they really going to fucking return it? Like I just don't think this is productive. Like we should be arguing to Nintendo themselves. That's the thing we should be arguing to right now. So yeah, to Nintendo, the Switch 2 is a solid piece of hardware. But it's also just more Nintendo Switch, better running Nintendo Switch, all that stuff. And, you know, I like a lot of elements about it. There's not honestly a lot of things about the hardware and everything that I dislike really. But yeah, it mostly comes down to like, yeah, this is a very iterative console and it has a ton of potential. And a lot of the experiences I've had on it thus far have been great. A lot of Switch 1 games work great on the Switch 2. A lot of the Switch 2 specific experiences that I've had have been solid. And a lot of the third-party games running on this thing work really well. I think Cyberpunk is really cool to see on the Switch 2. Yakuza 0 isn't like a miracle port or anything. I realized that game actually came out on the PS3 as well, so it's kind of like, all right, you know, like it's not like, whoa, Yakuza 0's on the Switch 2? Especially considering Yakuza Kiwami was on Switch 1. But still, you know, like, you know, that's cool that's there. Street Fighter 6 works well, and, you know, there's a lot of really solid experiences, and a lot of the third-party games, honestly, like, many of them have been running pretty okay. There's been some hiccups here and there, and there's been some weirder ports, but overall, like, I honestly feel like a lot of the Switch 2 specific software has been of a pretty decent quality. Like, overall, like, I'm content, but, you know, I am definitely interested to see where the momentum of the Switch 2 takes it, and I do feel like the story with this console is going to be quite a bit different in a year or two, you know, like it's definitely going to be in a different place. Will there be more game key cards? Will there be more physical games? Will third-party ports turn to just absolute garbage? Will we get more day-and-date third-party ports? Will we get a lot of third-party games that released on Switch 1? Will we see Switch 2 versions of those? Like, I think it would be cool to see like a Switch 2 version of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal and all that. Wolfenstein 2, Skyrim, just like see a lot of these like big home console games that were on Switch 1 get kind of like a Switch 2 upgrade. And I'm definitely interested to see what Nintendo's own lineup is, because Nintendo's 2025 lineup for Switch 2 is good. Like, we can't deny that. There's a lot of great stuff there, especially considering like Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and the stuff slated for later 2025 all is quality, but a lot of it is not the most like exciting stuff in the world. Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is gonna be a solid time, but like it's hard for me to care at all about that game. Like, I already didn't give a damn about Tears of the Kingdom story, and this is literally just gonna be like talking about a part of Tears of the Kingdom story that I think makes sense to make a Warriors game out of it, but it doesn't really excite me in the same way that Age of Calamity did. Like, the idea of like seeing what happened before Breath of the Wild was way more enticing than what was Zelda doing throughout Tears of the Kingdom. I'm like, I get it, but it's also like, And I know that Age of Imprisonment is a canon story and Age of Calamity wasn't canon, and that was a big problem that I had with Age of Calamity. But it's also like, I just don't really care about Age of Imprisonment, gonna be honest. Kirby Air Riders looks great, but also, you know, it does feel like we're getting a lot of racing games this year. Air Riders doesn't really feel like it's fleshing out the Switch 2's lineup. It just feels like it's like this is a brand new quality game. It doesn't really feel like it's filling a void in the Switch 2's lineup as much as other games potentially could feel like they do. Then you have Metroid Prime 4 and Pokemon Legends ZA. Some good stuff, man. You know, like a lot of great stuff, but you know, like I'm definitely interested to see what the Switch 2's entire lineup for 2026 is going to be like, and just see what kind of exclusive Switch 2 experiences we're going to get, what kind of lineup Nintendo's going to have. I'm very interested in that. And 2025 has a good lineup, but you know, there's something about it that does feel a little weird. Oh, and one final thing. I saw some people say that you can just rip the Joy-Con off without using the release button. So yeah, I'll give the Switch 2 that. It makes me feel like a fucking barbarian.